WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive, still broadcasting in powerful mono AM 1570 sound out at WNST. Always appreciative of all of our guests all week long, but of course, this week's kind of special because it's Restaurant Week. Want to remind everybody to get out for Restaurant Association of Maryland. We did 31 crab cakes in 31 days last month. Get out, support local here this week. We'll be at Cooper's North on Friday doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour presented by the Maryland Lottery in conjunction with our friends at Goodwill and Window Nation, and of course, Restaurant Week. This is a guy here that I once took a pizza recommendation on in Boston. I know he's a good eater. I've been watching him a long, long time, and certainly a great talker and a phenomenal writer. The emeritus, but always active columnist from the Boston Globe. He's been around the world and back again. We welcome the great Bob Ryan back onto the program. A true sports reporter in every sense of the word. What's going on, Bob? How's life up there in semi-retirement?
Well, life's been good. I'm starting in year 11 of official retirement from the Boston Globe, but I'm still alive and kicking. I do a podcast here on basketball with Jeff Goodman and Gary Tangway. I write every other Sunday for the Boston Globe. I'll be in this coming Sunday. Topic, I'm not sure yet. And I still am on Around the Horn at ESPN every other week. I'll be someday next week. Schedule comes out later this week. So those three things keep me, busy and active and on top, try to stay on top of things as much as I can.
Bob, you didn't promote the book. Come on, promote the book. What do you got going on?
I have my 15th book out. This one is a collaboration with Bill Chuck. It was his idea. Bill Chuck happens to be a nonpareil baseball researcher and historian. And we were acquaintances, really not buddy or anything like that. We've had an acquaintanceship over the years. And then in April of 2020, we were on the phone, and the subject of my scorebooks come up. Now, I have started keeping score when I became a Red Sox beat man in 1977. And I, after the end of that year, I was off the beat because Peter Gammons, who was the greatest baseball writer Boston ever had, came back to Boston, and he got his job back, and that was fine with me. He deserved it. Anyway, but I love keeping score. I've been keeping score, semi-faithfully for a long time. And I found up that every game, here's long story short, I have kept score at every baseball game, a major or minor, that I've gone to since 1977. That includes vacations. When I go on vacation, and every time, I never leave home without my scorebook, because you never know when a baseball game is going to break out. So the premise of the book is that this is my 1,400 game experience of things that happen in baseball games, things that fall out of baseball games, things that historical occurrences, one-offs. There's a few one-off things in here. And I'll give you Exhibit A. I'll try not to, the kind of things that can happen. In 1986, I was sent to Anaheim the last week of the baseball season, because the Angels and the Red Sox were both going to obviously be the foes in the ALCS in '86. And in order to get stories for our features, our previews of the ALCS, they sent me out there to get stories from Anaheim for a week. First night I was there, Joe Cowley throws a no-hitter. But it's not just a no-hitter. It's an ugly one-run, walked the bases loaded in the sixth, gave up a sacrifice fly, walked 7 guys, and get this one, Nestor. 138 pitches, 69 strikes, 69 balls.
I would call that the unperfect no-hitter, right?
Absolutely. Line drives all over the place. Shows you. I always said, somebody could throw a perfect game with 27 line drive outs. And that's baseball. So this is the beginning of the story. After the game, Ed Sherman of the Chicago Tribune and I went to the hotel bar, had a beer, and who's across the way? Joe Cowley. So I had to take my book and have him sign the book. That's not the end of the story. The following spring, Joe Cowley contracts the dreaded Steve Blass disease. He can't throw strikes. He can't throw strikes. He's released. He goes to the Phillies. They release him. That no-hitter is the last game he ever won in the major leagues. How about that?
Now, that's unprecedented? Nobody's thrown a no-hitter and then never won a game again, right?
Not to my knowledge. Or Bill Chuck's, and he's the historian. So I have that game, the scorecard from there that is represented in here, the no-hitter, and then I write the story, and then Bill Chuck fills in the blanks with history and different stuff you didn't know about this guy and that guy, because he's loaded, he's endless, his topic. And that's the way the book is. 150 games accounted for in here. All kinds of stuff. baseball things that happen. And here's my contention, and I mean this sincerely. I believe baseball has more conversational fodder than basketball, football, and hockey put together. That there's more to talk about. There's more history, of course. It's the oldest of the four by far in America. The first baseball league in America goes back to 1871. Okay, so forget about the history. It dwarfs them in history, but it's just that there's so much to talk about in baseball, and the things that happen. And this book is a fun book for the really diehard fan. Albeit it's a niche book. I'm not going to deny that it's a niche book for diehard fans. But if you are a good baseball fan, you'll get a lot of you'll enjoy this book.
Well, on the day that Maury Wills dies, you're on the Zoom here with a guy named Aparicio. So we have to let's put Belichick in the Ravens game just to the side for a second. Few things on keeping score. My dad was Scranton, Pennsylvania, played with Pete Gray when he was a kid, saw Mickey Mantle play at the old Yankee Stadium as a kid, the whole deal. My dad taught me to keep score the traditional way. A single was a straight line, a double was 2 lines, right? If I saw your scorebook, did you keep it in sort of that traditional way? I had my own language of how I kept score. And I had, 1979 Orioles, I had my own little black, book where I, every day would draw my own lines and do all of that stuff with Doug DeCinces. But were you a traditional scorekeeper in that way?
I would say that, yes. But the only guarantee things that that nobody can argue about, one thing and only, everything else is negotiable about how you're going to do it, right? That's strikeout. It's a K.
It's a K. It's a backwards K if it's looking, right?
Absolutely. And there are some people, some deviants who go K-E. No. It's a backward K. Absolutely. Now, everything else is negotiable. In this book, there's a rectangle for every batter, and I draw the diamond up front. So a guy gets a single, I go one line, and what field it was, one line 7, single to left. 1 line 8, single to center. If it's a double, I go up, put it up to half up, and it's 2 lines.
Did you draw bases around, or did you not do it that way? I drew bases so I could look down.
The bases, right? I chart a guy around the bases, and then
look down and see if there was 5 runs or 7 runs by how many diamonds are on my scorecard.
If he scores, I fill in. That's a run.
Okay,
I fill it in. And but and here's one of my pet peeves at Fenway that drive me crazy. After a play. They put up how to score, what it should be in your scorebook. If it's a fly to left, that should be 7, period. Nothing, no embellishment. They go F. I'll go, really? What do you put if it's a foul fly to left?
See, I may put a pop 7 if it's fielded behind shortstop and it's like up in the air a while and it's not a traditional fly out. My dad also had red stars that he would give if somebody went over the fence to steal a ball. He put a little star there and say that was an extra out. You know what I mean?
I star great plays, but I don't have it color coded. It's going to be in the same black pen. But right. But my point is, if follow this through. If you go F8 and you, that would be the greatest catch in the history of baseball. If a center fielder caught a ball in a foul territory, that's F. F means foul to me. So if it's if it's
F meant fly.
No, you don't need it. You don't need it.
The ball was in the air.
It's a 7. It's just now.
But if it was a gapper, I might put an L8, like a liner.
Wait a minute. If it's a liner, I go L7. That's different. L7 for a liner. If it's a line drive, but if it's just a routine fly ball, you just put the number. But if it's a liner, you go L. L7, L8, L9. Or L5, 4, 6, 3. Doesn't matter which one. Or L1. Liner gets an L, always. Now, there's one other category. This is where, because your inference is correct. Everybody does things a little bit differently. Everybody's got some nuance that they do differently. For example, ground rule double. I put a dot.
Okay.
That dot indicates it was a ground rule. A dot next to the, we're next to the double sign, a dot. So it's ground rule. So now I have a little category that I invented. You know how you get a little humpback liner? That I go SL, soft liner. I go SL.
Cheap hit. It means cheap hit is what it means.
Inside. That's for not cheap hit, but for an out. I don't do it for a hit, but you could. But you could. Somebody could come up with something. Anyway, I keep score every game, and that means. Let me give you one other example of why you always take your scorebook when you leave home and after in April. In 1984, I was covering the NBA Western Conference Finals, Suns and the Lakers. And while I was in Phoenix for one of the Suns games, Arizona State played host to North Carolina in an arranged match in baseball, in which Mike Roberts of Carolina and Jim Brock of Arizona State got together for a little 3-game series prior to them both going to Omaha. They each had a lot of time off, and they wanted to stay sharp. So Carolina's playing Arizona State in Tempe. I go to the game, at Sunday at their stadium. In this game were 9 future major league players and 2 future major league managers.
Let's see, USC, no, Arizona State. So that must have been Barry Bonds, yes?
Leading off and playing center field, Oddibe McDowell, who hit a home run. Okay. Batting third and playing left field, Barry Bonds, who did not hit a home run, but much better for my purposes, drew an intentional walk.
B.J. Suroff on North Carolina then?
Leading off and catching.
I know a little bit about baseball, Bob. I'm glad we both lived long enough to have this conversation.
Batting second, Walter Weiss, one of the 2 managers in question. The other manager, if you get this one, you go to the head of the class. All I can tell you is he played for Arizona State. Don Wakamatsu.
Oh, I know Wak. Wak, absolutely. That's Jack Del Rio's best friend in the world. Did you know that?
He was the Arizona State catcher. Anyway, I got this game in my scorebook, and I'm the only kid on my block that has that game in my scorebook. So.
Bob, I would love that. Bob Ryan's here from the Boston Globe. I could go all night, and I probably will because I'm more interested in that than I am anything else. The no-hitter part of this, I covered baseball for the better part of 21 years before Angelos threw me out, which is now 16 years ago. So I covered a lot of baseball, was on the road a lot, saw you and Gammons and all those guys in that high Fenway Park back in the 90s. I never attended a no-hitter.
Nor have I.
I had a couple busted up. I walked out of one. I had a flight in San Diego, a Sunday night, red eye back. Bud Smith threw a no-hitter on Labor Day, Monday night against the Padres. I was doing a story on Tony Gwynn. I got on the plane. I walked out of the stadium, it was the 3rd inning, and I noticed there was no hit. And then when I landed at BWI, I got onto the Park and Go shuttle, and I looked down at the USA Today, and there it was on the USA. It was like out of a movie. Smith tosses no-hitter in San Diego, and I'm like, I had a press pass and a ticket, but I didn't see it. So for me, the no-hitter thing, I was supposed to go to David Cohn's Perfect Game and see Springsteen. Didn't go that night. So, I mean, I've had the Messina night that he went to the 9th inning at Camden Yards. Didn't go that night, but it still got busted up.
Speaking of Messina, number one, I too have not been to a no-hit, no-run game ever in my life in Major League or minor league baseball. The closest I came was Mike Messina, but it was not. It was the Labor Day night in 2001 in Fenway.
I watched that game with Tony Gwynn. I watched that game in San Diego. The next day was the Smith no-hitter, the next night.
And of course, that's why I will never forgive Carl Everett for messing up my evening, I mean, Carl, 2 outs, 2 strikes, Carl Everett singles to right. And that was the end of the no-hitter and the perfect game. Yeah, I missed that. Once I was doing a book on minor league baseball in 1972, I wound up in Appleton, Wisconsin. There was a second game. I got there in time for a twilight doubleheader. And as I'm going through the turnstile, the guy tells me I missed a no-hitter in the first game. I only got to see the second game. So I missed it. I've never been to a no-hitter. The last no-hitter I saw was thrown by Pete Thurston. You say, who's that? Well, he was a pitcher for Lawrenceville School against Del Barton in 1963. That's the last no-hitter I saw. So, and now I told you the Cali one, but no hit, no run. That's got a major asterisk for me. But it's a great story, plays into my book beautifully. But I still have not seen a no hit, no run game in organized baseball.
Cold night in April. My son, who doesn't even like baseball, is about 21 years old, calls me, "Hey, Dad, I'm going to the Oriole game." And I'm like, I'm not going to the Oriole game. It's April. Why would I go do that? I went to see Mike Peters of The Alarm at the Recker Theater, and I looked up on the television. Hideo Nomo threw a no-hitter. My son went to the game that night. I did not. My son has seen a no-hitter. I have not.
My daughter's seen a no-hitter. She saw Derek Lowe throw a no-hitter in 2002. I was in North Carolina at the NSM convention. No, that's still a goal to see a no-hit, no-run game. But the Carl Everett one, just the Messina one, just freaks me out. I've gotten 2 others. I took Clemens into the 8th inning, and Doyle Alexander went into the 9th inning in Yankee Stadium when I was there, and I forget who broke it up. But so,
as a Tiger or no?
As a Yeah, as a Tiger, I was in ball. I was in
He
Yankees.
was good as a Tiger at the end of his career. Yeah, I mean, he was an Oriole in the beginning. Bob, I would just say this to you. You've seen a lot of games at Fenway Park, and that would not be a great place to see a no-hitter, just in general, right?
Well, they've had four of them since '09. Since '99, and Nomo. You mentioned Nomo and Lowe, Buckholz, and there's a fourth one, Lester. I saw the last 5 innings of that on TV. And Buckholz, I was in the Saturday night. I was in New York. I know that, and I missed it. Fenway. Before that, there hadn't been one. Well, there was Jim Bunning threw a no hitter in '58. Last out was Ted Williams. That was one. I know that.
Bob Ryan knows all about Boston sports at the emeritus, right? Okay, so I called you. We're doing this totally backwards with the book, but I love it. I taught my wife to keep score early in our marriage, like 03, 04. And one night I took her out to the game. She was keeping score on her shoe. Like literally, I'm like, wait, let me get you some paper or something, because she got addicted to doing it. But it is the lost art. So I'm glad
my wife has her own book, and she keeps score when we go to Fenway. The one difference is she never looks at it again, and I keep score so I can look at it again. That's the whole point of having it for me is having it. You never know when you're going to reference it, and it's good to have as a keepsake. But anyway, so my wife does keep score. She's probably the only woman in the ballpark keeping score.
Well, I have a fresh number 2 pencil available. All right, so let's get on to the Patriots and the Ravens and the state of the modern world, and we can talk a little Red Sox as well. But
sure.
The state of Belichick and where they are with Mac Jones and where the perception of them. And for me, Bob, I'm removed from it, right? Like, I mean, after the press pass fiasco and all this stuff, I did go online, and I've run 100 buses up for those games, through the playoff games and all that, with all of our fans and tailgates and beer and all that. But I went online and I'm like, I wonder what a ticket would be for a Ravens Patriot game, post-Plague, post-Brady. It's still a $200 get-in. I mean, it's still like a major thing to go to a Patriots game in New England, despite all the winning.
Well, that's interesting. I wouldn't have any idea what that what the price was. That's interesting. The dialogue this year was different, of course. A very unusual dialogue during the preseason because of the Belichick's mysterious but Belichickian quirk and not naming an official offensive coordinator, and that was the predominant issue for the entire training camp for talk shows and for columnists and anybody, was this whole thing about not having an official offensive coordinator who's going to call the plays and who's going to call the plays, and it turns out, and apparently it's been Patricia, we think, and how that was going to affect Mac Jones, who is still a young quarterback. It's only year 2, and he had developed a good relationship with Josh McDaniel, and how it's going to affect him. And this is so Belichick, to try and outsmart everybody, whatever his purpose and reason is. He hasn't really explained himself except to say that things work out and blah 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 blah. The first game was pretty much a disaster every way around. If you wanted to have a check mark of all the things that could go wrong to lose a game, they hit most of the boxes in that first game against Miami. Second game was a little bit better. The offense still was stagnant. They got a huge break. It turns out, take it away, they don't win the game. Gunnar Olszewski muffed the punt and gave them a first down on the 10. And then there was a penalty. So now they were on the 3, and they got a touchdown, and the score is in a 17-14 game. They also did one good thing. They ran the clock out in the last 6.5 minutes. They ran the clock out, ran it out literally, and got the first downs. And they were aided by some dumb timeouts decisions on the other side, and they got the first down and ran the clock out. They can run the ball fairly well. We think with Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harris, the offensive line blocked fairly well. Jones is at least going to be a decent NFL quarterback. What the ceiling is, I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. But how far you could go with him? Well, I went to the playoffs with him last year. I'm of the belief you don't have to be a Hall of Fame quarterback to take a team to the Super Bowl if you got the right surroundings. We've seen a couple of examples of that, but he's a decent quarterback. The defense has been pretty good, but still the offense. The questions about wide receiver. Nelson Aguilar made a spectacular catch the other day. It's the first 100-yard game of his brief Patriots career. Last year he was pretty much a bust, frankly. And they're still, and they went away from the tight ends completely. Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. We don't know what that means in terms of how it's going to affect this week. Anyway, they look like a total middle of the road team if they're lucky. They're no contender. If they I don't even think people here expect to make the playoffs.
Well, I mean, the Dolphins look better, and certainly the Bills look better as well. So the
Oh.
division has changed in
Yeah,
that.
and that's just that. And of course, the Jets actually won a game too. But Buffalo's the class of the division, and anyone. People always, they absolutely concede that. Question is maybe whether Miami had improved enough, and here's Miami that's sitting at 2-0, and they had that spectacular comeback on Sunday, and that's more. And Tua threw for 469 yards. Oh my God, in an incredible fourth quarter. Blah blah blah. They're behind those two. There's no doubt. Where they stack up with the Jets, we'll see. But it's a different feel now here. It's over. The reign, the era, it's over. And the question is, Belichick just turned 70. What's he trying to prove? Is he trying to prove to the world he can win without Brady? Or whatever. He still likes what he does, Nestor. I can tell you. The thing that people have to understand: this guy, he likes every aspect of his game, of this job. Every aspect. He loves training camp. He loves OTAs. He loves preparing for the draft. He goes totally into it. Even the thing with the media, he toys with the media. He can be good. He can. As the week goes on, he gets better and he gets nicer. For real. Sunday's useless. He doesn't want to talk after a game. But he totally still loves his job. Absolutely. And I think obviously he'd like to show the world he can win without Brady, but his record without him is, I think it's under 500 when you throw in the Browns.
Well, look at you, man. You're supposed to be retired and you're not. I mean, what else would he do? You know what I mean? I get into this question a lot with coaches and players, and when they get done and they have money, but to fill their day, golf and stock, looking at their stock funds, that doesn't do it. I mean, there's a sense of purpose that a man like Bill Belichick
we all have our druthers. If I had sufficient funds, I'd travel a lot more. Period. There's a lot of things I'd like to do. He's got the funds to do anything he wants, but this is what he likes. I respect that. But it's anyway, this whole thing, this curveball he's thrown the world with this coordinator thing is it's I don't know even what word to use. It's certainly odd, to say the least. But it's so Belichick that he would be the guy that would do this.
Last thing for you, Bob. You mentioned a little bit about accountability and them telling the truth or not telling the truth and where they are. Was there a point when you began all this? At least it feels this way for me. Maybe I was just naive and a kid. But when I worked at the paper in the 80s and I would stand in front of a hockey coach or an NBA coach, whether it was Jim Lynam or, that Gene Shue, that period of time, hockey coaches like Gene Ubriaco and Brian Murray with the Capitals or Terry Murray or, Jim Schoenfeld, any of the guys I covered, even Johnny Oates and Phil Regan, and I'm just going through Davey, maybe not Davey, because Davey was always coy, Davey Johnson. But most of the time, I felt like it was an honest give and take between reporters. There were a lot more reporters in your market. The accountability of Bob Ryan ripping your ass and having to be at your locker the next night kind of came with it. We're in a weird spot now, and we have a Baltimore Banner coming online here, and I talked to them a year ago about maybe writing a column, and I thought, I'm just going to write a column, and I want to be – so I've got a new name for it. I know you're going to like this. My name is Ness. The column is going to be called Column Ness. So that's what I'm doing, Bob. So I started to write a column, and I feel like I'm trained to do this from working at the Baltimore Sun under Ken Rosenthal and Tim Kirchin and John Eisenberg and the late, great John Stedman, who was a mentor to me. But what is a columnist for a 53-year-old guy like me who's done this all my life, 37 years? What should a column feel and look like in the modern era? Because I don't feel like it should feel like tweets. I think there's an art to writing and keeping people's attention, even if it's 15, 18 inches, 1,200 words, whatever it is. But this art form of writing something good off of a game that people would want to read.
Well, that's the game story. The game story is dying out. People don't want game stories anymore, and that's too bad because that was an art form that I thought I loved doing when I covered basketball and I was a beat guy. Now, as far as the column's concerned, first of all, you got to work around with your people. When you're covering a game and you got your beat people and you got your sidebar people, you have to convert. You have to say you have to divvy up the responsibility. And that's part of the deal. You have a conference, you who's going to take what when there's certain things that are obvious to you, who's going to take what. Sometimes you go as a columnist, you would say, I'm going to do the big picture, the big picture. Sometimes the thing is, you're a certain juncture in the season, and okay, here's where we are in the season. Based coming out of this game, there's no one size fits all answer to your question. None. No one size fits all answer. In my case, I mean, as you get older, one of the things that you can provide is some historical perspective and some just general perspective about experience, and when you've gone through countless coaches and coaching changes and general manager changes, or if it's college, athletic director changes, and you've got a perspective to put things, try to put things in perspective for the reader, you've seen stuff before. This reminds me of this or that, and I that kind of stuff. Obviously, that it's a perspective that you can have as you go on. You wouldn't have in your. You can be a brilliant writer in your 20s, but you don't have that store of backup of stored up knowledge and experience of what you've seen and what's happened. So that's Now I write a column for the Globe every other Sunday, I try. First thing I find out is what if there's something in the works. I want to know what the real people are doing, so I don't get in their way and step over anybody or be redundant. That's number one. So once we settle that, then I have to figure out what I'm going to write, and there's just different ways to go. One of the things, quite frankly, I can provide is a little historical perspective. I think you'll find them older columnists, whether they were the late John Stedman, whether they were Joe Falls in Detroit, whether they were the great, legendary, incredible Sid Hartman, who lived to be 100 in Minneapolis. Whoever it is, if you get up there, that's the best. That's your best service, to bring whatever perspective you can bring in that regard. You're trying to put things as much as you can in perspective, but you always want to be hip to something new, to the new people, and that's important too. So, but I wish there's really no one definitive answer at all. But the question you were asking about the game, the actual day-to-day game coverage, it's where people are now. It's observations people make. They don't have to have a long narrative. You can have just pick 5 or 6 points of interest out of the game and write. One thing I'm a firm believer in, though, you can never have too many notes. I love notes. Notes are important, and funny little, not funny, but just little odds and ends that you can have, and people with a good eye for notes I admire, and I always thought I had a pretty good eye for notes. And I'll give an example of a note that I came up with. Nobody wrote about it at the time, and that was I'm at the Red Sox game 2 weeks ago. They're playing with the Rays, and I see their lineup, and their lineup is heavily laden with Latin American players. I call them Caribbean players, although one of them, I do my little research. So I'm sitting in the stands. I'm a season ticket holder. That lineup included players from 7 different countries: 2 from Cuba, 2 from Dominican, and then Panama, Colombia, Venezuela, Mexico, etc., and of course USA. That's a note. Nobody, to me, that jumped out at me. Now, I mentioned it to our beat guy, and he put it in his notes column the next Sunday, giving me credit. All right. Meanwhile, did you see what the Rays did on Roberto Clemente Day?
They had every player in the starting lineup was my people.
Yeah, now that was right, and that was obviously, you couldn't avoid that. That was the story. But point is, I had that game on. I'm thinking, am I the only one that notices that there's all these Latin American players, and I'm just curious. And did you know that Betancourt, a catcher's from Panama? No, I didn't know that. Well, here's Christian Betancourt, and one of the players is from was from Colombia. Now there haven't been too many Colombians. There haven't been too many. I know we had one.
Colombia is a soccer country. It's not a baseball country.
We had shortstop Jackie Gutierrez many years ago, who was famous. He was the greatest whistler I ever heard in baseball. You could hear him whistling up on the press box. But that's a note. But he was the greatest whistling Colombian shortstop, Jackie Gutierrez. But anyway, but I mean notes. Stuff that I think you can never have too many of them. I'm a huge advocate of notes.
Gammons made a living on it on Sundays, didn't he?
Peter made the Sunday notes column an art form. I think the Boston Globe really pioneered, and that wasn't the only people, but they're making it a staple that every beat writer, every beat got a Sunday notes column, which they still do. That goes back 50 years to the summer of 1970 when I gave them a Sunday notes column in August on basketball, and that became, more and more picked up, and Peter made it, but he took the ball and ran with it and made the greatest Sunday Notes columns baseball's ever had. I can frankly.
So it wasn't Vince Doria's idea.
No, predated Vince. Predated Vince. Ernie Roberts was the sports editor then, and late Ernie Roberts, but no, it predated it. But that's a different. But yeah, good notes are invaluable.
Bob, you'll find this hard to believe, but I have every rejection letter I ever sent in 1986 and 87 and 88, just to keep me grounded. And I've run into some of those guys. I run in the door. I'll say it was a little sheet of paper. It had Boston Globe. It broke my heart. But things worked out okay. Bob Ryan, things worked out great for him as well. You know him from ESPN and the Sports Reporters here. Everyone knows him as the emeritus Boston Globe columnist, always with great. I didn't even ask you about the current Red Sox. Now that my Orioles are back into this thing,
right.
I'll have to bother you next April with these big Red Sox-Orioles clashes with Adley Rutschman and Grayson Rodriguez, right?
Well, I'm happy for Baltimore. I am. I truly am. I'm happy that the franchise is going to be resuscitated. I'm glad to see fans come back. But I have to do very quickly. Yes, sir. The ballpark renovation, thumbs up or thumbs down?
It's played the way it's played. I think they did it thinking it would really be an advantage to them to get pitchers. I mean, I go back to Messina's era and him pitching here, and the question of whether he would stay or not was 364 behind him. He'll be a better pitcher other places. And those guys going out to Colorado and getting their brains beaten in, there was always a perception. And look, they have all sorts of bourgeois that the Angelos family has put out for years about why they didn't sign a free agent or why they didn't pay enough. Part of the narrative was, well, we can't get good pitchers to come here. They'll never come here and pitch because of our ballpark. So there was a little bit of that after 30 years. But I think Elias and Sigmeidel, they did all of their measurements and all of their analytics and all of that, and just figured it would help the Orioles. And it would hurt visiting teams that are loaded with bats, that some of those fly balls would be flyouts and somehow they'd become a triples machine or something, like utilizing it. I don't know. It's played out through 80 games. I think it's ugly. I mean, if you're asking me about how I think it looks ugly. And I'd rather have more home runs, quite frankly.
Yeah, I just wondered. I haven't seen it. It was so drastic. I mean, really, the totally drastic. Obviously, it stuns me. But anyway, I mean, I'm a fan of the ballpark. I have been since the day they opened it, and that's.
Hey, were you a fan of we're going to put seats up on the Monster, or did you think that was blasphemy 20 years ago? You probably did. Right?
I took the old fart. Blasphemy group.
I had a feeling.
I'll be honest,
because you are an old fart.
I'll be honest, I thought it was heresy. I thought it was heresy, and I still am amused that people want to sit up there. It's a glorified bleacher seat. It's a glorified bleacher seat. That's all it is. And so you're atop the. All right, fine. If that matters to people, but I wouldn't want to sit there. It's a bleacher seat, and an expensive one.
I just call it a gimmick. It's a gimmick.
The first year, I know this. The first year, they didn't know what to charge. They had no idea how popular it would be. I think it was $50, and that was 15 years ago when they did it. And they had no idea that it was so overwhelmingly popular. So I don't know what they're charging people to sit there now. I think it matters. I think it's graded though on the rows too. It's it's cheaper in the third row, the second row, down to the first row. The first row is most expensive, I think. Last I heard. But hey, people like it. They like it. God love them. But it's a bleacher seat as far as I'm concerned.
Bob, as far as I'm concerned, you're the best. I appreciate you. I appreciate you always making time for me and certainly extolling your wisdom upon me. I act as the student in this particular case. I'm asking all of you old farts, as you'd say, how to write a right column, because I feel like in the case of the Ravens, and I say this, and I know you sit in the stands. I was a season ticket holder for 26 years with the Ravens. Seeing the game from that perspective helps you as a journalist, I believe, because if you're behind a piece of glass and that's the only way you see sports, you don't see it the way other people see it. But more than that, just that there's enough fans. They need some good critics, some wisdom, some real criticism, because the cheerleading I see and the necessity that I won't follow. You don't love the team. I don't care what you don't love the team enough, that there's some sort of test in the modern era that isn't true accountability, the way you and I and people like you trained me to say we should be. Are these people telling the truth? And if they're not, why? And how do we explore that? That was always my job as a journalist. That's really going away in a big, big way with team websites, league websites, and the lack of access, really.
Oh, the access. Don't get me started. You don't want to open that can of worms.
We'll
No,
do
no.
that in the spring.
Yeah. Okay.
I've had a rough enough week. Bob Ryan from the Boston Globe joining us here.
Bye,
You can
Nestor.
follow him out on Twitter. Love you, appreciate you, and I don't know why it makes me feel good that you haven't seen a no hitter either,
No, and
but
listen,
to some degree.
misery loves company. I'm
Well, I am
hoping.
miserable on that one. I am Nestor. We are WNST AM 1570 Towson, Baltimore. It's Patriots week, and Bill Belichick. We're spending plenty of time in Boston with people we like here at Baltimore Positive.